Hey everybody, Stu Smith here with another Tactical Fitness Report, and we have a special guest, Ben Milligan. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Stu.
So I usually don't do this, Ben. I usually don't have a former SEAL on and we talk only about his book. It just hasn't been that way, but this is not your typical Navy SEAL book either. This is first and foremost a historical book, and I got to just show it. We're going to show it right from the start. By Water Beneath the Walls, right? And did you ever coming up with that title? Tell me this. I know how you did it, because after I turned the first page, and because first I was like, that's a weird title. I don't get it. It just wasn't clicking in my head. Then I turned the first page and I'm like, Ben's a genius. So sorry about that.
You got me.
Yeah.
Go on. No.
Yeah. No, it was just really cool because I'll just give a brief, I'll give the last sentence of it's just a little paragraph. It was a victory that never should have been by water beneath the walls, and basically some fighters swam through an aqueduct and got into a city and took it over, and just genius. Really cool.
Well, I actually came up with that before I came up with the title. I always assumed that the title would come to me. When I sent the proposal in back in 2013, I had a sort of a placeholder title of the evolution, and I was sort of meant to just kind of describe this drastic transformation that naval special warfare had gone through from its origins in World War II, when they were reconnaissance swimmers and underwater demolitioneers, to this what we are, which is go anywhere, capture, kill commandos. And the only sort of metaphor I could come up with at the time was evolution. The problem I had with that title, and it bothered me for 8 years, when I was writing the book, was the more I got into the history, and the more I sort of started to see like the patterns and the rhythms of it, the more I realized that metaphor just didn't make sense. The metaphor, of this sort of arbitrary process of natural selection, this sort of inevitable evolution, it wasn't inevitable at all. The only reason that this, transformation happened was because of individuals who at, various points in that, that timeline, who had made very, decisive, decisions to, orient us in, that way, continue to orient us toward the land. And there was nothing, inevitable about that. So when I got the whole book in front of me, after this whole, this lengthy process, and the book was done, the book was with the publisher, and they kept emailing me like, what's the title? I don't have a title. I couldn't come up with it. It was the most specific form of writer's block that I'd ever had. And I didn't come up with the answer for it. I didn't come up with the title until I just sat down one day, and I started to think, I started to ask myself sort of a series of interrogating questions, what the hell is this book about? What is the book? And the answer that I came up with was, at its core, this book is really just an underdog story. It's a story that, it's totally unexpected, never should have happened. The Navy should never have created this unit or this institution, but it did. And so I started to think what are some other events in history that have been like that? And I kept getting stuck on this idea of, crusaders who, there's been stories throughout history of, knights that snuck into a castle using an aqueduct. And I like the fact that, an aqueduct is, a waterway. And I like this metaphor that, the Army and the Marine Corps, they'd sort of, kept the Navy, at bay. This was their, operational territory, and the Navy sort of snuck through it in a totally unexpected way.
Man, see, I knew you'd add even more genius to it. That is really that is really cool. But no, I've been fascinated by this book for the last couple of weeks. I can't tell you how many people I've told to get it. Even wrote a review for you on military.com that I was surprised they let me do it because that's not my scope of work to do that. I write 3 fitness articles a week at military.com, but I'm like, I got to do this.
And you didn't give me a heads up. I woke up and it was the nicest surprise I had all week.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, not a problem. I really loved it. And I think if you're going to go into this profession, you should know about the history. And I prided myself on knowing the history, but my history really started in 1960s, right?
Right.
It didn't really cover. Yeah, I heard about the NCDUs and UDTs in World War II, but in Scouts and Raiders, but never really. I was never able to personify them like you did, right? And you really gave them, not only heroic stories, in this book of what they were capable of doing with minimal training. I mean, these were guys that were like take a 4-week course on amphib landing and then go do it against the Nazis. I mean, that's pretty crazy. So the heroic stories in there. So it's a history book, but it reads like, like it's a Tom Clancy piece of fiction, because these heroes are just phenomenal. And I hair would stand up, reading some of these accounts, and it feels like you pulled it like right out of their memoirs or diaries, or maybe right even off of the award citations that these guys were coming home with 3 and 4, Navy crosses. And they were just,
and everything. If you're going to write about these people, the one thing that you learn early on is that everything is up for grabs. Everything that this that this person that you're about to write about is at your disposal to turn this person back into a living person, to turn this person back into an accessible human being, that you can meet. And the one thing that has always irritated me whenever I read history books is, an author will mention a character, they'll talk about things that character did, but they never take a pause to give you an idea of one, what the person even looked like, or 2, what were their personality traits that made the events, or that give some sort of context to the event that's to follow. So when I arrived at a character, I didn't pick a character first. I always picked an event first. I wanted to see the pivotal events that sort of led from World War II to the not the establishment of the SEAL teams, because I went further. I wanted to get to that point when the SEAL teams, become what they are today. Like I said, because the SEAL teams, when they're started, they're not, the SEAL teams as we know them. They're coastal raiders. Sure. Today, they're go anywhere commandos. So I wanted to get to that point. So how did I arrive at these characters? I picked the events first. So in each instance, I was finding an operation or a battle, something pivotal that allowed planners to make a decision on whether or not this institution, whether it was the NCDUs, the UDTs, the Rangers, the Marine Corps Raiders, whether or not this institution was going to be disbanded, or whether it was going to continue on. And I could always sort of find that event. And once I found that event, then it was just a matter of like, okay, so who was the most important person in this event to either helping the unit succeed or fail? It was always one of 2 options. There was never just a status quo. And so once I found that person, then it was just a matter of figuring out what traits in that person either led to that success or that failure. And so, the advantage that you have when you're, looking at, history that's, happened and with characters that, are no longer with us, is you are able to, talk to, folks that knew them. You're able to ransack the closets, the letters that they, collected, talk to their friends, and you're able to sort of put this composite or this, portrait together, that, gives all of us, now some sort of idea, what made that person special, what made their life consequential, at least insofar as, this, transformation, this evolution. So
Yeah,
that's what
excellent.
sort of arrived at it.
No, excellent way to do it. Your writing style was, just perfect in this. So let's do this. Let's back it up a notch before we go into the journey of how the United States created SEALs. Let's go into your own personal journey and talk about who you were when you decided to serve and become a SEAL.
Yeah. I decided I was going to be a SEAL when I was 12 years old. I think that's the first time I had heard about the SEAL teams. Prior to that, I got to back it up even further. Growing up, I was very close to my mom's dad, my maternal grandfather. He'd been a Marine in World War II, and I had always known that. Well, not always known, but at some point in my early teens, I had found out that after the Battle of Okinawa, they had planners in the Far East. They had they were getting ready to do the invasion of Japan, and they needed anybody that could swim to fill the underwater demolition teams. Well, my grandfather had always been a good swimmer, so he had volunteered even as a Marine. And I knew growing up that he had gone through underwater demolition training on Okinawa. So when I was a young man, and I sort of made it my personal goal to become a SEAL, I was not just it wasn't just a goal of mine, but I had some sort of family baggage or history to sort of propel me toward that decision. What was kind of interesting is that when I started the book, I realized that not only was I trying to find this history of this institution, and the everything that has led to what the SEAL teams have become, but I was also uncovering little mysteries about my own personal family, which I'd never really made that connection before. And I never understood, or I never knew, like you, I suspected that the underwater demolition teams had been, an exclusively Navy outfit. And, just from my own family history, I knew that that wasn't true. And I wanted to understand, how that happened. But as a young man, I had these sort of two parallel interests growing up. My grandfather, he'd always been a big lover of American history. When I was in junior high, he started every fall, he would take me to a different Civil War battlefield. It became like our annual tradition, and we kept that up just about every year until I joined the Navy. So I was, growing up, I was, when I wasn't thinking about, becoming a SEAL, I was thinking about American military history. It was, kind of in there.
That's really interesting, because a lot of folks that, kind of go down this journey, and especially starting to learn how to share stories or write in any particular genre, they typically have some kind of family member that, just kind of spurred that. Like my dad was a journalist and newspaper publisher, and my mom was an English teacher.
Oh, cool.
So every time I wrote something in school, I felt like I always had two sets of eyes on it, right? Just to verify how it was working and how it was looking, and they fix it.
That's no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it was really fun because, one, it got me used to understanding the process of a writer, is that we truly don't write, we actually rewrite for some editor.
Yeah.
So, some editor is going to help you put it in a particular way. And so I was never offended when somebody said, "Oh, you need to change this and change that."
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, okay, that's how I grew up that way. So, so so obviously, going into SEAL training is a pretty physical challenge going into it. What sports did you do? How'd you prepare?
I was probably the most unprepared physically for buds that, of anybody that's ever gone through it. I mean, I was a good runner. I was always, that was about the only thing I did. I went to a very small evangelical school from third grade until I graduated my senior year. There were 54 kids in my graduating class. And, even though my class was so small, I don't think there was ever a sport that I was able to get on the varsity team of. I was that bad of an athlete. I never had any real hand-eye coordination. I couldn't, throw a football. I never played baseball. The only thing I was good at, I was a really good trier. So I was relatively quick on my feet, and I was able to, do a few. I was fast enough on the track, but not fast enough to go, play any collegiate level sports or anything like that.
Sure. How old were you when you went to Buds?
I was 22. I graduated college. So,
okay.
And I was naive enough when I was in college to think that, I would be a good candidate for OCS and then a follow on, trip to Buds. But when I was putting my package together, my application, one of my letters of recommendation had been from my high school soccer coach. Knowing, I didn't know. I never met anybody in the Navy. I never met a SEAL. I didn't realize how competitive it was. Everybody, when you're, putting that package together, people have letters from admirals and senators, and here I can't imagine what they thought of my application when I sent that in. But,
that's pretty fun. A lot of people wind up graduating from college and then enlisting.
Right.
It is. I mean, you probably had a dozen classmates that did the exact same thing.
And I didn't realize, not being from the teams and I've never met a SEAL. I didn't realize that, how well educated, the enlisted ranks are in the teams. I mean, I had lawyers in my class. I had, Rhodes Scholars that were, just enlisted. I thought I was, unusual when I went in. Not at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a smart bunch. It's a different breed. And so after Buds, what teams did you go to?
I went to Team 4. I was there until 2004. Then when I was, going through that, I was dating an officer. She was getting ready to get sent to, we didn't know where, so I got out and was sort of figuring out where she was going to get stationed. When she finally got stationed in San Diego, then I went back in. I went to Team 5 at that point.
So, oh, nice. Yeah. That's one way to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, all in all, how many years were you in the Navy?
7 active.
Okay. Well, those are pretty busy years.
Yeah.
Team 4 and Team 5 deploying overseas. Obviously, you're also a combat veteran as well. When did you decide that it was time to get out?
When I had my first kid, I always, when I got back in the second time, I figured I would stay in for forever. But once I had that first kid, I was like, I don't think I want to leave this little guy. So.
Yeah, I had a very parallel path as well. Top it off with a few injuries, and
Right.
and then a kid comes in and changes your life for sure. But then you decide you're going to write this book, and I cannot believe how much research you did in this book. Like I was shocked when I looked. First of all, that's a big book, right? And then I was looking at the bibliography side or all your references, and I mean that's a big chunk of the book right there.
Yeah,
I mean, and you probably had even more, right?
It would have been, yeah. So when we were, going through the final stages, and publisher was, asking for my endnotes and my bibliography. When I initially sent them over, they looked at it. Well, endnotes are one thing. The endnotes show, or they show attribution for every source that you used, whether it's a quote or a figure or something like that. What the endnotes don't convey is all of the 90% of the iceberg that you don't see, which is all of that other material that educated you to be able to, write the chapter in the first place.
Well, it's phenomenal, and it's a laundry list of things to go further research.
Sure.
So I've been looking at, there's some names in this book that I was like, never heard of him. Let me read a little bit more about him. And, and I'd find him online and read his, award citations. And
right.
Next thing you know, they had, that person has a book. And I mean, I can't imagine the rabbit holes you went down. Doing
a lot of rabbit holes and a lot of pages that, wound up on the cutting room floor. I could probably write, or I could probably just compile another book based off of the pages that didn't make it into the book. So I think the manuscript ended up being, it was over 700 pages once it was all put together. So I think we came in at like 511, at least almost 200 more pages.
Well, I tell you, another thing I liked about this book is it's a Navy SEAL book, but I don't think the word Navy SEALs even used until like chapter 11.
Yeah, right.
So when I consider a Navy SEAL book, you are really focusing on what caused our conventional leaders to start thinking unconventionally.
Right.
And it was a series of things, coming all the way back from post-World War I status of our military into a really growing, I guess, just a big fire that is raging in Europe that's occurring from the post-World War I era. And then we got a Great Depression. We have, all these other things that are challenging us, economically. And I think somebody that you would say, being a conventional leader, says, well, we're going to have to start thinking unconventionally because we just don't have the assets to be a huge conventional force.
That's a good way to put it. The one thing that I didn't set out to do this when I started, but the SEAL teams have built up this myth. It's our own origin story. It's our own creation myth that we sort of authored ourselves. In the 1960s, the UDTs had developed from World War II. They'd been attempting to push the boundaries of naval warfare in Korea. They went further and further inland, and then when Vietnam starts, the planners in the UDT, they go up against this very conventional Navy leadership and convince the Navy, against their will, to create this institution. And then Kennedy, gives his support to it, and the Navy's balking while the SEAL teams are developing. Nonsense. It's a compelling myth, I think, because at some point every SEAL who's ever served has come in contact with some sort of conventional sailor, conventional officer who has treated them badly, or who has acted in a stereotypical conventional way. So it makes sense. I mean, it was that's a myth that sort of had a well fertilized ground to grow in. What I found was the exact opposite. We didn't author ourselves. In some sense, we did. I mean, everything about that origin story is true. Yes, the UDTs were pushing the boundaries of naval warfare in Korea, and yes, when we got into Vietnam, we became something that the Navy had never really intended. That said, it was always conventional leaders in the Navy, the Army, and the Marine Corps that authored these concepts. And anybody that has any sort of association or personal experience in the military knows that it's an incredibly hierarchical, institution, organization. You can't do anything without buy-in from those senior leaders. And it was in fact the senior leaders that were the ones that came up with this concept. Whether it was Kelly Turner in World War II, who was he was a surface sailor. There was nothing unconventional about him except that he was a very unconventional person. Take it all the way up to Arleigh Burke. Arleigh Burke had never served a day in any of the Navy's elite or unconventional branches. He hadn't been a submariner. He hadn't been in aviation. He hadn't been in UDTs. But here's this person who has a really he's got an incredible understanding of war and conflict, but he's also someone who is totally preoccupied with pushing the Navy as far as he can into conflict. He doesn't want the Navy to become irrelevant. After World War II, the Army, the Air Force, they have this idea that amphibious warfare is a thing of the past. We're going to be able to do everything with aircraft, whether it's transporting troops to shore or forward deploying,
dropping bombs.
Dropping bombs, exactly.
Yeah.
For the Navy's leaders, that is that's preposterous. They know how difficult it is to have an expeditionary force. And so Arleigh Burke and all of these other leaders around him, they are completely preoccupied with getting the Navy as pushed far forward into that conflict as possible. And the SEAL teams are one of the the results of that. But we came from what most people would consider these very conventional fleet sailors. It was their idea.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hey, you want to hear an interesting piece of history that I am involved in?
Sure.
Arleigh Burke. I just so happened to be a young lieutenant SEAL at the Naval Academy running that SEAL program.
Uh-huh.
And I was there doing my thing, and I see presidents and all these different folks coming in. I'm like, wow, what's going on? I happen to walk around, and then I see it's Arleigh Burke's funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I saw Arleigh Burke's funeral. My wife and I were walking around. We just had lunch, and we saw Arleigh Burke's wife get escorted up the chapel steps by the president, and it was just really amazing. And they had this strong carriage, and they put him out there at Hospital Point. It was just phenomenal. And that was one of the things I was like, yeah, I've heard of Arleigh Burke, but let me do a little more research on Arleigh Burke. And I started finding more of his journey just fascinating, especially being a conventional sailor.
Yeah.
That was just an unconventional thinker that really kind of paved the way for a lot of this. And that was one of my questions for you. I wanted to say, who do you think in this journey to go from everybody wanting to do something like a commando raid to amphibious landings to raiding and scouting, the words were just so jumbled, or in the early days, there really wasn't a special operations flow. You didn't think it was going to evolve into that. Who do you think is the person that really made that happen? If there was one, obviously there's a dozen in here.
Yeah,
but
that's a tough one. There's if you want to really start a firestorm on Facebook, make the claim that so and so is the father of the SEAL teams.
Well, of course, we all know that's Draper Kaufman.
Man,
father of the SEALs and EOD were brothers. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
Nothing will irritate Tom Hawkins more than if you say that. And Tom Hawkins, I consider Tom he's the oracle of NSW history.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would say Draper Kaufman is definitely one of those very consequential characters in our history. And I dedicate almost 2 chapters to him. But to answer your question, who is the most important person in coming up with the SEAL teams? The easy answer is Arleigh Burke. The creation of the institution would not have happened without him. And like I said before, the reason that he created it is because having a Navy, disconnected to combat was not acceptable to him. So that's why he creates this institution. Other people were responsible for laying the groundwork for him to even have that idea that this could be a possibility, and other people came after him that modified his concept being what they are today. If there's an indispensable person that we can call the father of NSW, for me that would probably have to be Phil Bucklew. His career spans the entire spectrum of naval special warfare history. He doesn't serve in the UDT. He doesn't serve a single day in the UDT, but he serves in two of the institutions that helped the UDT become what they are. He serves in the Scouts and Raiders. He helps develop the curriculum. The Draper-Kaufman ultimately compresses into what becomes Hell Week. He serves in almost every theater of conflict in World War II, and one of the most important theaters and the most forgotten theaters, which is the Navy's guerrilla warfare or guerrilla war in China. He's leading guerrillas in China when almost the rest of ground forces have stopped fighting in World War II. And then he carries on, and he becomes without him, he gets placed in charge of all UDT and SEALs in the Pacific Theater at the beginning of the Vietnam War. He helps push the Navy into Vietnam, and then from his position as that commander, the SEAL teams are faced with a sort of a fork in the road, where Navy planners are trying to decide if they want to keep them in Vietnam or push them out. They have very lackluster opening chapter in Vietnam, as you'll find in the book, and Navy planners almost kick them out of the country. Had it not been for Bucklew and Bucklew's history, in his own unconventional warfare experiences, it's not a guarantee that the SEAL teams would have ever had the experiences that they had in Vietnam, or would have developed into what they became. So for me, the two most important characters are what I said.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Arleigh Burke having President Kennedy as his ultimate boss was also helpful.
Yeah.
It was short-lived, but I mean, he was obviously a former naval officer in World War II, had a love for the Navy. That was kind of there. But I think if it hadn't been for Bucklew, UDT probably would have been disbanded, like the Marine Raiders, like the Army Scouts, which
I think you could make that case. I agree. I mean, Draper-Kaufman is often confused as the father of UDT. He's not. The father of UDT is Kelly Turner.
Yeah.
A conventional naval officer, Kelly Turner, full stop. However, Draper-Kaufman, there's nobody who's connected to the institution of the Underwater Demolition Teams as much and as emphatically as Draper-Kaufman. He's there for all of the major events, the scouting of Saipan, the use of UDTs to find that backdoor to Tinian, which is maybe the most important event in the Central Pacific campaign. Being able to secure Tinian with as few casualties as possible, and that would not have happened without Draper-Kaufman. And then Draper-Kaufman's leading of successive underwater demolition, reconnaissance, and demolition missions as the commander of all UDT swimmers at Okinawa, and he is the indispensable person when it comes to.
Yeah, I would say Draper definitely started things rolling, but he definitely handed it off.
He did. I mean,
he was kind of done.
He did. He wanted to be his dad. He wanted. I mean, there was nothing more important to him than becoming a regular naval line officer to commanding a ship. That's what he wanted. All of this other stuff is, his history as a as a French ambulance driver, his service in the British Navy as a bomb disposal guy, his development of the Hell Week and the NCDU course. That was all for him, not what he wanted to do. Which is, if you ever want to give advice to a young frogman going through training, like, you're starting this journey with an idea in your head of where your legacy is going to be, where but it might not go there. You have there's going to be opportunities that are presented to you, and be open to those opportunities, because war is changing, and you don't know, your experience is not going to be the experience that you think it will be.
Yeah, Draper Kaufman actually worked his way up into becoming the superintendent of the Naval Academy. And in the 60s, back then, there were academy guys trying to get into UDT and SEAL, but they had to go surface first. That was just one of the rules. You had to be a conventional sailor first, and then you could lateral transfer. And I saw Dick Couch talk, and he was a student at the Naval Academy when Draper Kaufman was the superintendent. Very interesting piece of history there.
Oh yeah. And
Dick Couch, once had the ear of Draper Kaufman, Superintendent Kaufman, as midshipmen sometimes are gabbing back and forth, and he said he wanted to go to UDT and go to SEALs, and he was like, Draper Kaufman actually told him, "Don't ruin your career. Go surface."
Don't ruin your career.
Yeah. Well, and
that, I'm not at all surprised by it either.
Yeah, and thinking about the the hierarchy of SEALs back then, you probably capped out at lieutenant commander. I mean, I mean, there even like COs were lieutenants at one point of these commands, and so it hadn't really created the higher echelon of officers yet until well after Vietnam.
No, and you can see that. That preference for the regular Navy over all of his unconventional experiences in his letters, even when he's in all of those unconventional experiences. The one benefit that I had, taking 10 years to write this book, is that I was able to find so much stuff, so many closets that I was able to dig into. And one of those, closets was Draper Kaufman's. His daughter was kind enough to let me come in for 2 days and just go through letter after letter after letter. And you get his personality. It pops right off the page. And his preference for the surface fleet over whatever he was doing was there even when he was a young man.
Well, how about this? When was the first use of the term SEAL? Like sea, air, land. When did that actually become a thing?
That was in a white paper that Bill Gettner sent. It was something that he'd been working on, and it was just a memorandum that he sent up the chain of command to Arleigh Burke. And you can see, I went through the CNO papers to find it. You can see Burke's handwriting on the page, and it was just a proposed title for this unit that did not exist. And from that title, and the acronym is there, sea, air, land. It gives a sort of, even though they hadn't made the connection yet to what the SEAL teams ultimately became, and they're still thinking of this unit as being sort of a coastal raider unconventional force. That universal go anywhere capability is right there from the very beginning in that name: sea, air, and land.
Nice. And when was that? And
that was in 1961.
Okay. And how about who was Gettner? What was his?
He was a staff officer on.
Okay, so conventional Navy staff officer.
Another conventional guy who, like the rest of the guys on that staff, he had, he earned his chops in World War II in the surface fleet. He was actually, Gettner was a pilot. He was an aviator.
Okay.
And one of the treats in writing this book is I was down in Fort Pierce back in November to give a speech to the SEAL reunion, and afterward we had a little book signing. There was a lot more people there than I expected. I thought it was going to be, 24 two dozen folks in the audience, sort of disinterested in whatever I was saying. There ended up being like something like 5,000 people in the audience, and afterwards, I was, there signing books and meeting folks, and one of the people that came up and signed the book, I asked them what their name was, and she said her name was, I can't remember her first name. I think it was Betty, and like, what's your last name? She said Gentner, and my ears perked up, my eyes perked up, and I was like, wouldn't happen to be Bill Gentner's daughter, would you? And she was.
Oh,
so that was pretty neat.
That is pretty cool. So she obviously gets to read about her dad in your book, and
she did, and she was, I think that was probably the first thing she did when she picked it up. Flip to the index and see if her old man's in there. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really neat. Well, now, where was I going to go with this? Oh yeah, so we now have the first use of SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
The term. When was that name actually used officially?
Well, it's established in January 1st. SEAL Team 1 is established January 1st. SEAL Team 2 comes online a week later in Virginia Beach. But it had been an established, the SEAL teams, they know that they're going to establish them as early as, so 6 months. Burke is out 6 months before that in June. So at least 6 months before that. So a year before January 1st, they know that they're going to create this unit, and it's going to be called the SEAL teams. Burke retires 6 months prior to the SEAL teams being established. And there is a period where George Anderson, who relieves Burke as the chief of naval operations.
Yeah.
Anderson comes in and he sees this proposal for this unit, and he doesn't like it at all. Anderson is not Burke, and if you compare their two careers, they're totally different guys. Burke, he spends 6 years as CNO. I think Anderson gets booted out after the Cuban Missile Crisis. But when Anderson sees this proposal, he wants to backtrack on the whole thing, and he actually goes, he tries to understand why the Marine Corps isn't doing the job it should be doing, which is supporting the fleet. And he tries to, he thinks that Marine Recon should be doing everything that this new proposal is going for. And his planners have to convince him, I have to educate him on the history of all this. The Marine Corps doesn't want to do this job for us, and if we continue to rely on the Marine Corps to do this, we're going to be just as frustrated as we've always been. We need our own in-house capability to do these missions. So Anderson throws up his hands, lets Burke's plan go through as written. So
nice. One of the things I found interesting too is like all of these really incredible units that were created during a time of great need, prior to World War II, during World War II, were quickly disbanded in peace. And then to have this new unit created in 62, in a time of relative peace, goes to show you like the differences between some of the conventional thinkers that disbanded the Marine Raiders, disbanded the OSS, right? I mean, it naturally kind of moved into a different world, but there were still special ops missions that were being done by the OSS that got moved into the Navy. Now this is part of a new Navy set. So, what do you think, the difference between, these units that were disbanded and the units that stayed, that eventually all became part of what we now call SOCOM?
Mm-hmm. I think in every special operations unit that was created between World War II and 1962 has its own sort of origin story and disbandment story. The Marine Raiders are created not because the Marines want them. The units that succeed, or the units that carry on, are units that are created by their parent organizations to solve specific needs. The units that don't succeed, or the units that are disbanded, are all units that seem to have been imposed upon the services. So in the case of the Marine Corps Raiders, Marines have no interest in creating a elite organization of raiders. They want to become the Fleet Marine Force. All of their leadership is totally oriented toward establishing their service as a equal service with the Army and the Navy. They don't want this other unit, but the Navy does. The Navy is responding to the interests of the Commander-in-Chief, which is Roosevelt at the time, and they forced the Marine Corps to create the Marine Corps Raiders to go do these distracting raids throughout the Pacific. And as soon as the concept is sort of disproved in the debacle at Macon Island, well, the Navy pulls its interest. The Navy decides, well, you Marine Corps, you can do what you want. Marine Corps, as soon as they have an opportunity, they get rid of the whole Raider capability. Similar thing happens with the Rangers in World War II. George Marshall, he's interested in the British commandos only insofar as bringing combat experience to the regular army, to support his infantry, if you will. And once his infantry has that combat experience, he has no real need for the Rangers. He doesn't really see the strategic potential of these sort of behind the lines commando raids, which is fascinating to me. If you've ever read the book Rogue Heroes by Ben McIntyre about the British OSS experience, or SAS experience in World War II, they have a completely different origin story for their commandos than we do. The SAS is, performing some of the most long shot missions in World War II, and there's nothing equivalent in the U.S. military. But these are, organizations that sort of developed, organically. So there's an enthusiasm for them at the lowest level, whereas in the Army and the Marine Corps, these ideas got sort of imposed upon them until they get to the Special Forces in the 1950s, 1954. Those are created, but they're created from within. They're not imposed upon them.
Right.
I would say that, at the outset in World War II, nobody's creating a naval unit to become what. Nobody has this idea of what this institution's ultimately going to become. The naval planners, they're really just solving individual problems. We need a force that can go, scout the beaches. All right, we'll create a force that can scout the beaches. Well, we also need a force that can go blow up these obstacles. All right, we'll add that to the curriculum. Whereas the Marine Corps, the Army, in World War II, and then again in Korea, the guys are thinking, they're almost entrepreneurial in their sense. They're speculating. They're thinking of the potential of a unit like the Rangers, but they don't really have the technology to support the missions that they're sending these guys on. And every one of these missions leads to incredible disasters, and oftentimes the military planners end up blaming the guys that failed on the missions, and they don't really think, well, the failure is in our own concept. from the beginning. We failed in, how we, set this organization up.
Yeah, you also went into a even higher level of special ops training and mission creation whenever you started going into Beckwith's story.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he went to SAS training,
Yeah.
like that so much. He's like, we need a unit here that does the same thing, which was the birth origin story of Delta.
Right.
Right. And then they had Vietnam experience, which didn't go well at first, but I don't think any of these guys had, great success immediately into it, because none of them had real training. They were relying on just their own intellect and unconventional thinking and just toughness to get some of these things done.
And the result every time was, the result of poor planning is almost always, incredible bravery, or, by the on the part of the guys that, this horrible planning has happened too. So in the case of, Martin Watson and the whole Virginia 1, debacle, you've got John McGee, who's he's an unexperienced POW survivor from World War II, who is thinking unconventionally, but he just doesn't have the experience to know that his ideas are, ridiculous. And he sends this, unit of 4 American Rangers, deep behind enemy lines to blow up a rail bridge, and puts them in the most, dangerous position, forcing these Rangers to, fight for their lives, and, leads to one of the most incredible stories in, the entire Korean War. But it's incredible, it's equally incredible in, how bad the planning was for it.
Yeah, not only that, the planning, and then they become POWs, and then they escape multiple times from POW camps. I mean, it just keeps going on and on about these folks that are, really breaking the glass ceiling of special ops.
Yeah. And they're totally forgotten. I mean, in the case of Martin Watson, who's he was a Ranger character. One of the neat things about Martin Watson, or one of the, several of the characters that I found in the book, is that they intersected with this history at multiple times. Martin Watson is a 19-year-old kid in World War II who joins the Rangers. He'd been almost a criminal, in Hartford, Connecticut, when he enlists in the Army. He becomes a POW at Cisterna, which I write an entire chapter about. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back in the Korean War. He has to join the Army again. I think in the space between his release from POW camp in World War II and to when he comes back into the U.S. Army in, I think, 48, he's arrested something like 76 times. And each one of these, each one of his arrests, is for public intoxication, disorderly conduct, fighting with police. Finally, the judge just gives him, you can go back into the Army, or you can go to prison. But none of that history would have been. It was completely lost. The only reason I was able to uncover that history is because I stumbled, upon this record in the National Archives. It was I had a hunch that there would be a POW report. I'd come across POW reports from characters in World War II, and mostly these reports were 2 to 3 page documents. They would just do a quick interview with a guy after he got out of a POW camp, and then get him off to his family as quick as possible. I assumed that there would be a report like this for a Korean War POW survivor. So I sent in a FOIA request to the National Archives. They said they found an account of Martin Watson in their records, but it was part of a larger account that was something like 750 pages. I went back and forth with the archivist several times, like, can you just cut out Martin Watson's section of that 750 pages and just scan them and email it to me, because I just didn't want to go like, I'd just come back from the National Archives. I couldn't go back again. But she kept saying, no, it's a 750 page document. I can't go, and it hasn't been cleared yet. Like, all right. So the next time I was out there, I was at the tail end of a research day. I was exhausted. My back hurt. I was ready to be done. I just said, you know what? I remembered that, document was there. I requested it. They brought it out. It was 750 pages. And so I start to look through it, to find, the section on Martin Watson, and realize that all 750 pages are on Martin Watson. And that whole document, that wrote my 8th chapter. It was all the details of the Virginia 1 raider in there. His numerous escape attempts, his arrest reports were in there from his.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. That was a fun.
Man. So where did you wind up doing most of your research?
Probably, I think four or five institutions were the biggest ones. The National Archives was probably the biggest in College Park, Maryland. After that, the Navy Yard, the Naval Heritage and History Command. Then the Army Archives in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is a nice spot, about 45 minutes away from Gettysburg, if you ever get a chance to go up there. The UDT SEAL Museum. The UDT SEAL Museum, they opened their doors for me. The only problem I had at the UDT SEAL Museum wasn't access, but it was just construction. I don't know if you've been down there in a while, but they've been renovating and constantly building to, respond to the huge interest. So every time I went down there, the archives were in a slightly different place. So I'd have to find them and, kind of go through. So I only did my research chapter by chapter. So I'm sure that there was a better way to do it, but I just couldn't. I don't have the brain capacity to be able to, know where I was going in the story. So I just did chapter by chapter. So inevitably, whenever I started a new chapter, that would be another trip to a new archive. So the toughest one to deal with was always the Navy Yard. They threw up roadblock after roadblock. And I think part of it is just their archives are located on an active, military base. So it just was very difficult to get in there. Always required a lot of planning.
How about Nimitz Library? Were you able to do some stuff out of Naval Academy? Was that useful for you?
It was. Nimitz Library was fantastic. And not just, for their archives. They don't have a ton, but the stuff that they did have was always, totally unexpected. Like, a lot of microfilm that you just wouldn't expect, for the Naval Academy to have. They've done, a lot of work in oral histories. But, one of the best things about, Nimitz is just the scenery. It's a totally quiet space. You walk in there and, it's just the students are so respectful, and, I'm sure you feel this every day, getting to, interact with these kids, but this is the best our country has.
I used to study there every night. I had to get out of the hall where everybody was studying during study hour, and it was just always noisy. I mean, you're supposed to keep it quiet, but people always walking in your room and disrupting you. So I would haul it out to Nimitz every night to study there, and I had a little love-hate relationship with Nimitz Library, but it was very helpful. It's what I had to do to finish that school.
Just they've got so much there. Like you walk into an aisle, like you think you find the book that you're looking for, and then you go to the space in the library, and there's 15 other books that they have that you never even thought to look for. And every time I would go to Nimitz, I would plan to get these 3 books, and I end up walking out with 25 books, or spending an entire day hunched over a table, photographing page after page after page of these books. And I got more efficient as I carried on in my research. But yeah.
Well, I tell you what, the research is incredible. You gotta check out this book. I'll put a link to it in the description of this podcast as well for those of you who are looking at. But By Water Beneath the Walls, go to Amazon, obviously pick it up. Last question for you, Ben. What's next? Do you have another one percolating back there?
I do. I've got two ideas that I'm sort of toying around with, and I like both of them, which is a problem. Because at one point, or a few weeks ago, I thought, well, maybe I could do both at the same time, which is the worst idea I've ever had.
Yeah, that's hard.
But yeah, I've got a couple of ideas. I'm reluctant to tell anybody what they are at this point, but
is there a particular genre you can share, like Civil War?
I think my sweet spot's right in this 30-year time period. I've always thought, I've always been interested personally on that 100-year period between Napoleon and the First World War, and I'd always thought, that's where I would focus my efforts. I'm not an academic, though. I don't have a PhD. And that's a really crowded space for a lot of academics. So I probably will stay away from that. I think I'll probably stick to this 30-year window between World War II and Vietnam. Might spread the edges out a little bit, maybe edge toward the First World War, edge a little bit past Vietnam. But I suspect that I will stay in nonfiction narrative history writing. I don't have the confidence to write fiction.
Well, I tell you, the way you do write, though, I mean, you give each one of these characters, I mean, just so much personality, when you're doing it. It doesn't feel like I'm sitting in a history class learning about history, right? It actually felt like I was learning about this person who's doing an incredible historical achievement at this particular moment in time. And it just kept me constantly either reading it or listening to it. So I would read this book when I was at home, and I would get in my car and listen to like the next chapter on audiobook, and it was that fascinating for me.
Well, it was fascinating for me too. I didn't expect to, fall as head over heels as I did for the subject matter. I kind of came to the book reluctantly. I knew that I wanted to write history. I knew that I wanted to write military history. I knew also that I didn't want to write anything about naval special warfare. I came to it, only because I realized, nobody, like I said before, I'm not an academic. I don't have a PhD. Nobody's going to give me an opportunity to write a history book unless I have some sort of personal connection to the subject matter. So I came to it, reluctantly, but when I started to dig into it, like you, I got hooked, and it became, this 10-year obsession that I couldn't shake it. And part of the reason I couldn't shake it is because I found these characters, who were, they became, almost every bit as real to me as anybody that I ever worked with. Couldn't let them go.
What's fun for me is going on Amazon and reading your reviews by folks. And a lot of them I recognize, some of these are Vietnam veterans that I have met through the years. And they say the nicest things, like, he has the personalities of all of these guys that I served with down perfectly, or, he talks about a guy being his commanding officer, and that was him, and it's just really neat to see other, Navy SEALs, former frogmen talk about this book. Because like I too, I talk about it all the time. I can't tell you how many midshipmen and young kids in the delayed entry program that I have been say, you got some spare time, read this. You don't have your spare time, find time to read it. Because you need to learn about the history of what you're about to get into. It's just going to make you that much smarter and make you appreciate what you got when you get there.
Well, thank you. I just heard that the BUDS instructors are recommending it to guys that are making it through.
Oh, nice.
But then my next question after that was, how many guys graduated in this last class? Something like 13. It's like five classes a year. So I'm getting 60 books or something. I don't know.
Yeah, SQT. Yeah, it's been a little tight lately. It's an overmanned,
I guess.
population right now in the teams, and the spigot is shut really close to tight, and it's just a trickle getting through that program right now. The last Hell Week had 90% attrition by week 4.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Last class that, from day 1 until week 4, they've lost, they start at 209 and they finish with 20. So I mean, that's insane. So it's a winter class. I get it,
Yeah, right.
but still, it's you gotta have bring your A game to that school if you are trying to make it. So definitely. So, hey, Ben, thank you so much for your time. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I am going to continue to plug this throughout my my personal journey as well.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it.
we'll you'll see it posted on social media and things like
Thanks for
that I'm just going to keep plugging it because people need to know about this book.
Well, thanks also for what you're doing with the community and getting these guys through. Everybody that, all these young guys that are coming to me, asking for advice, I steer them right to you. So.
Oh, well, thank you.
You do that.
Thank you. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're just working out and writing about it.
Awesome.
So.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, everybody, check it out. Last Time by Water Beneath the Walls, The Rise of the Navy SEALs by Ben Milligan. It's well worth your time. All right. Until next time, my friend.